Joining me now is Arizona Governor Jan Brewer. Thank you, Governor.
Hi there, Andrew. It's great to be with you.
I want to ask you a question that I'm kind of not understanding with regard to the federal view of this. The federal government's contention is that state and local law enforcement have no business infringing on their jurisdiction, immigration law, but local and state law enforcement have to uphold federal drug and gun laws. How does that work?
Well, it's what we keep asking. It's a little bit bizarre. We certainly believe that our law enforcement agencies are trained and that they're going to abide and enforce the rule of law here in Arizona, and that's what we are pushing the federal government to do their job. And our law enforcement has always helped them do their job. But the bottom line is the federal government isn't doing their job. So, you know, our law enforcement ought to have the right. I ought to have the right to protect our citizens. And that's what we're going to continue to do. We're going to continue to fight. What's taking place on the federal level is just simply outrageous. We need our borders secured.
Now, I have another question about unfunded mandates. I mean, if you're in a state with a low level of illegal immigrants in your state, let's say maybe Montana, you might not have this problem, but if you're being forced to meet the government halfway on Medicaid or housing or education or welfare subsidies, and you have people in the country illegally, you're forcing the state taxpayers to subsidize the presence of illegal immigrants in the state.
You're absolutely right, and we have a budget of $8.3 billion, and it cost us approximately $1.7 billion for education, health care, and incarceration. That's a lot of money for my taxpayers to be paying for illegals in the state of Arizona.
Another thing I don't understand is your predecessor seems to be completely opposite of you. Has this made the fight difficult or interesting or impossible? I mean, how is it working when you fight a former governor of your state?
Well, it's interesting because, of course, she probably realizes the difficulty that we are facing here in Arizona, having been the governor here. But since she's gone to Washington, D.C., she's forgotten all the problems and the issues that Arizona is facing. And I believe the federal government has an agenda. They don't want our borders secured. They want to mandate. They want to abuse our states' rights. And they just simply don't care. You know, some of the things they have done, it's like this deferred action, a backdoor amnesty, if you will. They basically have said, you know, drop dead, Arizona. We're going to do whatever we want to. So they're just moving forward, and I think the only way we really are going to remedy it is November 6th. And that's the election day, and that's when we need to get out there and vote and make a difference.
Let me ask you.
We need to get our government back in line.
Let me ask you a question on the personal level. You have been accused of the most awful forms of racism. You've been called I mean, I don't want to try to repeat any of it. But what fascinates
Please don't.
I won't. What fascinates me is the activists and even progressive Democrats have taken this debate far and away from security, unfunded mandates, sovereignty, the rule of law, the people that waited in line and did what they were supposed to do, the insult to them, and made it about race and race alone, which is not what this is about.
No, absolutely. And you know, Andrew, those of us that have been born and raised in the Southwest, we know what diversity is. We don't even give it a second thought. The bottom line, I'm not a racist. Arizona is not racist. We are not bigots living in Arizona. We love our neighbors, but we do believe in the rule of law. And, you know, because our border is right there with Mexico, we are the gateway for the majority of all the illegal immigrants that are coming across the border and the drug cartels. And so we are subjected to the kidnappings, the drop houses, the prostitution, the torturing, the extortion of families out of Mexico. Our citizens are living with that. And all we simply want to do is to enforce the rule of law, which I might remind you and your watchers here that, you know, 67%, maybe even 70% of the American population, they agree. They agree that the rule of law ought to be enforced. And yet we have a federal government that just turns a blind eye and dictates, if you will, what he wishes when he wants to satisfy what he believes is the right thing to do. Well, it's wrong. You and I, we have to obey the rule of law. We couldn't get away with the kinds of things that are taking place. We would be punished. But for whatever the reasons, I've got my suspicions, he chooses to do what he wants.